134 of the Archie Sonic the Hedgehog comic book, which came out over 15, 16 years ago, is one that has been talked about a lot, and for good reason. Mostly it's due to the fact that we had what was known as the infamous slap. Now, you can debate on how that slap came about. Um, you could debate that, you could debate from a behind the scenes situation that at the time one of the lead writers on the book, Carl Bowlers, wanted to break up Sonic and Sally because he didn't find it believable, and he was more in favor of Sonic being with Mina Mongoose instead of Sally, or with anybody else besides Sally. Now, you could also attribute it from an in-story perspective, like several fans, like CrystalMaiden77 did. Because you see, before 134, Sally had gone through a lot from an in-character, in-storyline perspective. I mean, you could trace it all the way back to some of the things that CrystalMaiden77 said in her review of 134. But some of you could also trace it back a lot further than that. Heck, I would trace it if you want to look at it from an in-character, in-story perspective. I could trace it all the way back to possibly the start of the Princess Sally miniseries. I could trace it all the way back to issue 29 when the original plan for her to be roboticized at that time was to help her infiltrate Robotnik's headquarters, find out his plans, kind of become a spy, but that backfired. Thankfully, she was de-roboticized, thanks to, of course, plot convenience and Deus Ex Machina. You can trace it all the way back to the Endgame saga, issue 47 to 50, where she apparently fell to her death, but as we find out at the end of issue 50, the fall that she took did, was put her into a comatose state. And of course, you can apply a lot of what Crystal Maiden said even after that. But it's more. But there are some things CrystalMaiden77 forgot to talk about when getting to that point. You see, Sonic and Sally was still somewhat of an item, even when Sonic went on his world tour with Tails to go after Naugus, and then he came back. Something happened in between um, issues 77 and 122. You see, what happened was Carl Bowlers at the time, who was the head writer, decided that he wanted to go in a direction that obviously was a very popular trend at the time, and that's take these established characters along with some newer characters and put them into a high school setting. And that's exactly what he did. He came up with a story to where Elias, Sally's brother, had become king due to the fact that their father was injured and out of commission at the time. And Elias made the executive order that the freedom fighters be disbanded and that they now live regular lives as teenagers, and that all problems and situations would be addressed and taken care of by Jeffrey St. John and the Secret Service. Now, of course, this didn't sit well with Sonic or some of their friends, but they were willing to roll with it to see what happens. The way this affected the situation with Sally was all the freedom fighters who were part of that team were put into the education system. They were put into high school or junior high in the case of Tails and Amy. However, there was one exception. Sally. See, Sally ended up being put being put into school as well, but she was being homeschooled. She was being taught at the castle. Now, this didn't sit well with Sonic, and he went to the castle to kind of try to talk to her or talk to Elias, see what's going on, see why Sally wasn't in school with them. only to be shrugged off by Jeffrey and St. John, who said, "Well, do you have an appointment with her? She is royalty after all." And this, to me and to a lot of fans, was kind of a way for Carl Bolas to subtly write in a scenario to where Jeffrey still held this torch with Sally, this love for Sally, to the point that he was willing to manipulate her brother to prevent her from being with Sonic, and not just giving his team a chance to shine, but also a chance for him to be with Sally. I know it sounds a little confusing, but that's pretty much the way I see it. Now, of course, Sally didn't like this at all, but she was willing to accept it. And it was because of this situation that you had the whole scenario with Mina Mongoose come into the fold. I mean, you even have a scene, maybe you'll see it on here, where while they're in class, Sonic introduces Bunny to Mina Mongoose, and Bunny coldly kind of says howdy. Like she sees Mina trying to waltz into Sally's territory and take Sally's guy. So it was because of that whole high school situation that, you know, the whole scenario with this love triangle or love square, or whatever you want to call it, began. And it was along with this, along with Sally's dad being injured, Elias becoming king temporarily and then running off and that falling back into Sally's lap and back into the king's lap, and all these situations happening, including um, the debut of Eggman slash Robo Robotnik as the new main Robotnik in the land. Because basically everything they had succeeded in accomplishing up to that point became for naught. So yeah, there was a lot of scenarios, like I mentioned earlier, that Crystal Maiden pointed out. And throughout all this, Sally still kind of carried a torch for Sonic. There's no doubt about it. And for her to see these scenarios where he was possibly going to hook up with Mina Mongoose, it didn't really sit well with her. She just couldn't accept it. Now, Crystal Maiden can say that Sally acting coldly and emotionless was a reason for that. Was basically because of that reason, I should say. And Crystal Maiden has a point, but I don't think that's the case. I think honestly, what happened was Sally was trying to keep her mind off the situation, because if she would have kept her mind on the situation, she wouldn't have been able to get anything done, any missions or other important situations done. So she had to occupy her mind by focusing on these other things and not the situation with Sonic and Mina at that moment. It wouldn't be until she had a talk with Bunny that I think she kind of had the idea that maybe the whole Mina Mongoose thing was a one-sided deal. Like it was more Mina than it was Sonic. This, of course, was later confirmed with issue 122, when Sonic, along with Mina, came to her rescue, and she told Sonic that she loved him, and he said he knew. And, despite how you interpretate that, you can kind of sense that Sonic always had the same feelings for Sally, and that's why he was kind of, how do I put it, shove offish a little bit or reluctant around Mina, because he still had feelings for Sally, and he saw Mina as someone that was trying to overstep their boundaries when they weren't supposed to. Now, you take that, of course, and then you take the proposal, the royal consult proposal that occurred um, about an issue or so later, and then you take the whole situation with this alien race coming in and threatening to destroy Mobius and all that, because basically it was their fault that the Mobians came to be through mutations or whatever, and Sonic sacrificing himself and seemingly being gone on for good, and then coming back literally from the dead, you know, and the person that's most saddened over you being gone, thinking you're dead, sees you alive, and then blatantly, through her teeth, says she always knew you were going to come back. But then you get these subtle clues that she had been going through a lot of therapy and all that over the past year to accept the possible loss. Now, what's interesting about this is how they set that scenario up. You see, they basically build up the fact that because Sonic was 85 light years away, 85 million light years away, that what felt like only a few weeks was actually a full year on his planet. So with that, situation, and then Sonic basically jumping into the back into the fire, and Sally witnessing this herself, elf, any therapy that she had to kind of calm that trauma down just you know dissipated, which would explain, when you think about it, her situation in 134. And you know, as I mentioned earlier, Crystal Maiden and many others have their opinions. They could, they have their opinions of Sally going through so much previously, that with Sonic rejecting to stay behind and at least let his injuries heal so he can have a speedy full recovery, instead of rushing back into things, if you will, was basically the last straw, and all this frustration, all this anger, pent up frustration and anger that she's had from from situations to where missions didn't go the way she was hoping, to where she nearly died, to seeing a possible interloper into trying to wedge their way into her love life, here and there, to basically being not allowed to, go to school with her friends, and all that. It's like you can't blame Sally for finally just letting it all out. Now, in such a public display. But like I mentioned earlier, it wasn't if you look at it from a behind the scenes situation, it's because Carl Bolas, who was writing the book at the time, just didn't want to see Sonic and Sally together. Just felt like it wasn't the right thing to do. Now, thankfully, when Ken Penders came back on board, despite how you feel about him now, and some of the information that has come out about him, basically, Ken Penders saw what Carl Bolas did and said, "Nope, I'm not going to do this. This is not right." And he did what he could to kind of fix the situation. He basically finally gave Sonic and Sally a moment to reconcile, down the line, and kind of smooth things out, if you will. I mean, he didn't smooth it out to a point that, oh, Sonic and Sally are back together. He just found a way to kind of address the entire situation, and the way he did it was he took one of his last stories called Line of Succession and used that to reveal the fact that the reason another relationship that fans were truly behind, which was Bunny and Antoine's, the reason it had broken off was because the Antoine that was in the story was not the real Antoine. It was actually his evil alter ego, Patch, from an anti-Mobius world. So, by exposing, Patch for who he was at the end of the two-part Line of Succession, it kind of, in Ken Pender's own way, wrapped up a lot of stuff. It wrapped up the entire scenario, between the characters. Now, after Ken Penders left, of course, Ian Flynn came on board, and Ian Flynn, of course, with any new position or taking over any new lead writer position, or any kind of behind-the-scenes position when it comes to any kind of media, is left cleaning up the baggage or cleaning up the debris. And boy, did he ever. I mean, basically, Ian Flynn had to come up with a scenario had to basically, as best he could, kind of fix a lot of what not only Carl Bowlers did, but a lot of what Ken Penders tried to fix but couldn't fix because his contract or his agreement with Archie Comics had come to an end. So Ian Flynn stepped in, despite how you feel about him, and did what he could to basically um, clean up a lot of what was left behind. He he used he if you fast forward several issues, he started to kind of rekindle or kind of patch up Sonic and Sally's relationship. He started to fix it a little bit. He even went as far as to have Sally get a love interest in a character we have seen in the past called Monkey Kong. And the way I saw that was more of a situation that if you're a fan of Saved by the Bell, the original Saved by the Bell, it's kind of like Zach Morris having a love interest in the Saved by the Bell movie Hawaiian Style and the summer episodes, the summer job episodes of Saved by the Bell, where he fell in love with his boss's daughter. And that was it. And that was it for those love interests because they were only done for those situations, those story arcs. And that's kind of how I saw Sally's situation with Monkey Kong. And thankfully, Ian Flynn fixed it enough to where almost 100 issues later, he put Sonic and Sally back together. Would it be a long-term deal? No, because just like Ken Penders, believe it or not, had done with Sonic and Sally, here comes a dark, tragic situation to kind of screw things up. And it did. Because basically what happened is we ended up having the first of many, I think several Sonic Genesis waves, or Sega Genesis waves. And they were all done to celebrate a situation. You know, the first one was done to celebrate Sonic's, I think, 20th anniversary as a franchise. So all the stories were based around Sonic 1 and 2. And then afterwards, you had the situation which, honestly, I was not a fan of, and that was the Mecha Sally deal. I mean, you may have noticed that recently I re-uploaded several 4K or 1080p 60 frames per second updated videos of videos I had done in the past talking about 231, what was to come, you know, my thoughts and all that. So basically, yeah, you had the whole situation with Mecha Sally, which I was not a fan of. In fact, even though I kept getting the book in the mail, I did not want to read an issue until the story arc was done, and that was around 247. Because I just felt like, why would you want to do this? Why would you want to go in this direction? It doesn't make any sense. Hence, but anyway, let's go from from behind the scenes and let's talk about a little bit about in story situation. Um, Basically, like I said earlier, the whole situation with Mina Mongoose and Sonic, it didn't make Sally emotionless. She decided she wanted to focus on something else to keep her mind off it. Now, fortunately, a lot of things did come into play. Um, you know, her brother, like I said, running off, and then later on, being found once again by Jeffrey St. John and finally confronting Jeffrey and saying, look, you know, I'm not going to take any orders from you anymore. And Jeffrey's like, look, you have a right to be angry with me. I took advantage. I shouldn't have done that. Um, to the point that, like I said, she ends up, we get to a situation where she ends up being kidnapped by Knack and his goons, plays them for fools, and it's during her attempted escape that she's rescued, meets up with Sonic, and then says she loves him. And then about an issue or so later, about an issue or so later, the whole proposal thing happens. They are engaged, and then the sacrifice occurs, and then of course in story and all that, that does take a toll on her. But later on, like I said, thankfully when Ian Flynn came on board, that kind of changed, And from an in-story character situation, not only did Sally kind of see how wrong she was in her actions, especially with 134, but her and Sonic started to slowly patch things up and become chummy chummy again to the point that they were slowly what was being done was they were slowly in character and in story slowly kind of building back up that possible chance at a relationship. Now, of course, it was during all this as well that she's gone through some other situations as well. And thankfully, due to her previous experience going through some trauma and all that, and all unnecessary drama and all that, she was able to overcome that in a more, calm, relaxed. Okay, let me explain it from my situation, a more legitimate kind of, how do you say it, role, if you will. Um, and that's what she did. I mean, you take one of the issues later on where she's put on trial by the royal council, and that's another thing that came into play. Elias, when he came back, it was established that he didn't want to have full control, basically. Or some of the people, mostly Tails' parents who had made a return, didn't trust Elias, didn't trust the royal family with all this power. So a decision, a compromise was made to create a royal council, basically like a congress, a senate, if you will, that would basically make the decisions, and Elias would be the one to finalize it, just like the president does. So anyway, the Royal Council put Sally on trial for for treason, for basically leading her group into the anti-Mobius world to stop the anti-Sonic version known as Scourge and try to restore order. And the person that accused her of this was Hamlin. Now, I mentioned earlier that part of what built up, maybe, in my opinion, to her doing what she did in 134, or added to it, was she was training Hamlin as one of her substitute freedom fighters, as one of her new freedom fighters, I should say, in the Sally miniseries. So, long story short, Sally is put on trial by him for treason, and then we find out that one of the reasons mainly is because even though she trained him and he acknowledges it, he never was ever asked to go on missions with them. He was never recruited to go on missions as a freedom fighter. And that basically he's decided that, hey, if I'm not going to be able to do it on the field, I'll do it in the court, I'll do it behind the scenes. Now, some people might say, well, all Sally had to do then was. Now, I'm sure some people might say, well, in character, what Sally should have done is tell Hamlin, look, I'm sorry, I'll make it up to you. Here, we'll go on a mission together. We'll put you on the next Freedom Fighter mission. And that probably would have resolved things, but who knows. But yeah, but the thing is, even though she was kind of disappointed in Hamlin's actions, she did handle it a lot better than previously. Um, But yeah, just a lot of situations going on. Like I said, you had the Iron Dominion coming in, and then her and Sonic and all of them going on a quest to kind of defeat the Iron Dominion from, I guess you can say, within. And then her developing this relationship with Monkey Khan, and that was kind of contrast, I guess you could say, to Sonic having a relationship somewhat with Fiona Fox, who turned out to be a traitor, went with his anti-evil double, his rebellious anti-self, because she wanted more fun in her life. Stuff like that. So to me, what Sally had gone through before what she did in 230 was it parallels to what she had gone through before, because she was able to handle it in a more calming situation, even knowing that, hey, I'm probably going to lose my free will, so be it. And that's what happened. But there were several times when, even after she was roboticized, in 230, that even after she was modified slash weaponized and all that, you could tell there was bits of her still there. Like, She could have gone. There was a situation where she went to the village where Elias and his family was at, and she could have gone after them, but she looked out the window almost in sorrow and regret. She could have finished off Tails when he was fighting her, but she gave him the option of, hey, save this village or fight me. What's it going to be? And some would say that's a bit of the old Sally breaking through, because she'd basically be the one to be like, hey, what's more important? What if I taught you? What's more important, their safety or mine? So there's a lot of baggage going on and everything. And yeah, to say Sally's gone through a lot, from what not just what CrystalMaiden77 has brought up, but many have brought up, depending on how you feel from an in-character story perspective to a behind-the-scenes situation. Yeah, she's gone through plenty. Now, as far as basically the Sally from 252 and onwards, I know Crystal Maiden was kind of reluctant to want to talk about this era of the Archie Sonics, which would be the last era, but there was a reason. There was a reason this error happened. Now, she did kind of talk about it, but basically, the situation was there was a behind the scenes legal issue between Archie Comics and Ken Penders for royalties. You see, after Ken Penders had left, a lot of the characters that he had created up to that point that were originally just part of the book, he wanted money for. He wanted to be paid for their use. That being Jeffrey St. John, Hershey Cat, Julie Sue Echidna, um, and Scourge, Fiona, and many others. He wanted royalties for these characters, and Archie Comics was like, "Look, why do we owe you royalties? We don't owe you anything. You signed a freelance agreement that basically states that whatever is created is not just our property now; it's also Sega's mostly." So a whole situation, a whole shebang situation happened behind the scenes to where, in the long run, Archie Comics and Sega decided the best scenario, along with Ian Flynn, decided the best scenario was to go a rebooted route. And the way they did this was with 247. 247 served as the end of the first era of the Archie Sonic comic, and it led us into a crossover with the other Archie's licensed book, Mega Man, and then that led us, of course, into the soft retcon and reboot. And the reason we call it a soft retcon and reboot is because the characters are still somewhat the same. There are some minor changes and stuff in personality and in other situations like that, but they're still pretty much the same characters. And the reason this was done was to kind of try to wipe the slate clean. And instead of starting the book over and starting with a new number one, they just decided, you know what, we're going to keep things somewhat intact, and we're going to figure our way around this. And I'll give them credit, much to anybody's chagrin. They did what they could, and from what they did, despite how you feel about Ian Flynn and anybody else that contributed to the soft retcon and reboot, I have to say they did a great job. I have to say they did a terrific job here. I mean, they gave the characters a little bit more personality, a little bit more something to do. I mean, heck, when you think about it, Ian Flynn even said that one of the things that a lot of people seem to be pointing out when it came to Sally and Nicole was there was something more there than just friendship, but it was never confirmed. It's only after the book occurred that Ian Flynn said in one of his podcasts that what a lot of fans suspected was indeed true. See, what Ian Flynn, I guess, hinted at or was using little nods here and there to when it came to Sally and Nicole's a friendship or a close friendship, was it was more of an LGBTQ situation between the two. So anyway, Long story short, that's why this whole soft reboot, soft retcon thing situation happened was because of the behind the scenes issues between Ken Penders and Archie and Archie Comics slash Sega of America, or mostly Sega in general. Now, from an in-story continuity perspective, basically, after issue 247, where they finally were able to catch up and capture Sally and shut her down, is when the second Genesis wave occurred, and again, this led into a meeting with Mega Man, and Mega Man and Sonic having to fight Dr. Wily and Dr. Eggman because both wanted to kind of rewrite both the worlds in their image. And along the way, they had to fight roboticized versions of their allies, of Sonic's allies, if you will. But after all that was said and done, basically everything was kind of restored. Mega Man's world was restored to normal as if nothing happened. But Eggman, determined not to lose to Sonic once again, even after going through all this to try to rewrite the world in his image, screwed up Sonic's attempt to restore the world as it was, and thus that's how we got the situation we did with issue 252. And it's basically here that we see Sally is okay. She is de-roboticized, and she is exactly what was promoted several times. But basically, she has a new look. And when she finally meets up with Sonic, and along with Amy, because we find out that during the situation, Amy and Cream got teleported into Blaze's world. Basically, she, along with Amy's wondering what Sonic's so happy about, what he's talking about. And so when they finally explain the situation to both, so when Sonic and Nicole and the others explain the situation to Sally about what's going on, and the fact that they all had the memories, they all have these memories of a previous life that was restored to them thanks to the leftover Genesis wave energy that was absorbed into Nicole, that basically the same that basically the world they're living in is an altered version of the world they used to live in. And that the reason they've gone through and the reason their history is, feels so different, like the past histories, their own individual histories feel a little off or different and not like how they should be, is because of that alteration. Now, of course, Sally is a little skeptical along with Amy, but they decide, you know what, if, you know, getting these memories back, whatever they may be, is to help Nicole and maybe start to help heal the world, save the world, and all that, or begin the process, then so be it. So, just like the others before them, they touch Nicole, absorb the Genesis wave into them, and all the memories start to flood back in, including Sally's memories of being Mecha Sally. And she, of course, is regrettable about that. And what happens, you even have a little arc with her, a little character growing development moment with her, where she regrets where she's kind of having a hard time leading because she's regrettable about what she had done in her previous life. But just like Bunny had said, and just like Nicole pointed out, look, that was in the past. That was not really you. That was Robotnik. That was Eggman's doing. I mean, you are you're a Sally now that did right by others. You inspired others, and your names are dropped like Loop and Dulcie and stuff like that. So that's kind of yeah. Basically, she get it. It's not as dramatic, if you will. Thank goodness for that. Like the previous issues, but basically she does have a character redeveloping, regrowing moment here, to where she realizes, you know what, Nicole, you're right. I need to focus on this. What happened in the past is the past, and that's in another lifetime now. I'm going to focus on preserving this lifetime. And that's what she does. And it's here to where, in character and in story, you kind of sense that there's something more between Sally and Nicole than there ever was in the previous issues. I mean, you kind of had a hint of that before the first Genesis wave, but You kind of see more of that now, especially when you get to the story arc in Sonic Universe called Spark of Life. So yeah, you can kind of tell that there was something there besides just pure friendship between Nicole and Sally, especially when it came to Spark of Life. Now, did she have moments at the time where she felt defeated and everything? Yeah. I mean, there was a moment where they fell for a false Chaos Emerald. And, it's like, you know, they felt defeated, but Sonic was able to encourage them and say, look, don't let this down. Don't let this get you down and stuff. So, again, we had a lot of good moments. A lot of good moments. And she even showed how good of a leader she is when they did a second crossover with Mega Man. And she was able to not only rally her friends, but also Mega Man's friends as well as allies from different video game worlds. You know, so all in all, Sally has gone through a lot when it came to the comic in general. But was it was it all good? But was it for the best in the end, I should say? Well, before I talk about that, I want to talk about one more behind the scenes situation. You see, there was more stories obviously planned for the characters, but we never got to them. I don't know what they had in store for Sally, but I think they had some plans in store. Maybe they would have gone the LGBTQ route officially. We don't know. Because after 287, things started to get a little wonky. It's like something was happening behind the scenes with Sega and Archie. To finally, a lot of people, including myself, started noticing that our issues, if we were subscribers, were coming in the mail sporadically or were being delivered online sporadically, and something just seemed to be up. And what a lot of us had suspected was they were trying to renew a license again because they had gone through this previously, and unfortunately they couldn't come to terms. And I guess because of a lot of the behind the scenes baggage that had preceded Sonic in the past, that Archie Comics was like, screw it, we don't want to have anything to do with this thing anymore. It's done. Let's just move on and let's put more focus on other things, because at the time when the comic originally was over, they started to put more focus on some other properties, their own in home, their own in home grown properties like Archie himself and Josie and all them. I mean, heck, they just had Riverdale debut on the CW, which is a good series. Don't get me wrong, but they just had Riverdale debut on the CW, so they wanted to put more focus on things like that, which is one of the reasons I think they just gave up on the book or decided to end a partnership with Sega. Um, but yeah, were the other stories planned? Possibly, absolutely, but we'll never know. We'll never really know. Um, but as far as Sally goes, everybody looks at her design and says, is that it's kind of inspired by, Mecha Sally's design. Well, that was the original plan. You see, originally, had things not gone the way they did, Sally was going to get de-roboticized, but the de-roboticizing result would be her having the design she has now, or she got post in the post soft retcon reboot. Um, she would have had that same design had things gone originally as planned. Um, Before this whole scenario behind the scenes occurred. So yeah, she would have had this Mecha Sally inspired look no matter what. Um, Overall, though, like I said, in story and character, Sally did prove to be a good leader and a good friend. Like I said, um, she showed her true leadership ability in the second crossover with Mega Man and all that. At along, where she was not only showing leadership prowess with getting her friends together and getting Mega Man and his friends together, but be getting all these video game properties, heroes, and even villains together to fight Vector Sigma, if you will, was I think a great moment for her. And then what she did in Spark of Life, standing up for Nicole and telling basically Nicole's original creator that Nicole has evolved. She's become more than what you think, is pretty cool. I thought it was a great moment for her. And I will put it this way, Sally, and I'm not just saying this as a fan, but in story and in character has basically grew to become more of a badass. She was more of a badass character here. You could tell. I mean, there are moments when you get to Panic in the Sky and you get to some of the f- battling moments that they have there, that you see a more badass side of her. It's like you have a moment where they're all beat down a little bit, that being Antoine and Bunny and her, and she's like, you know what? We're not done yet. Let's keep going. And they keep going and they keep going. So, in general, Sally definitely had a character regrowth and redevelopment when it came to the soft retcon reboot. And you know, again, what the future held for her is kind of unknown because, unfortunately, the story ended abruptly. I mean, we were supposed to get a bit. I mean, we did get a bit of background of how her and Nicole met in this interpretation compared to her previous life, her previous timeline that she existed in. So we have a clue of how her and Nicole became BFs, if not more so than that. We have a similar, if not different, origin. We have an idea. We get an origin of where she gets a clue as to where she got her ring blades instead of just the roboticization and all that from the previous timeline. So she had a lot of character growth, a lot of moments. You know, a lot of, like I said, she had a lot of moments, a lot of growth and development. It even shows her being a lot younger than she is there. A bit of a, we even get a flashback with her and Loop the wolf, where she has a design that's similar to what you see now, but her vest is open. You can see her black tank top, and she has a black shorts and all that. But she has like a little headband in the middle of her hair. It's kind of called back to the original design, which I thought was cool. So you had a lot of these great moments, a lot of these great moments, a lot of these great regrowing and redeveloping moments for her character that I think still would have been, that I believe in story and in character still would have been built upon had the original timeline not been interrupted for a second time by Eggman's meddling. In general, I will say this. Despite how you feel about the character, despite how you feel how the character was treated, or how the character was represented, one thing is for certain. No matter how she was portrayed, from a behind the scenes situation, no matter how she was portrayed from an in story character situation, one has to admit that there will be no, that despite what the future holds for this character, and a lot of people want to see this character in the IDW book along with the other freedom fighters, but despite what the future holds, there's no denying that this character, from an on-screen perspective with the Saturday morning cartoon to mostly the comic perspective, Sally Acorn is a character that will go down as one of the best, one of the more beloved, and at times most controversial non-game characters in history, especially when especially when it comes to being made exclusively for a franchise like Sonic and any media adapting Sonic at all. So yeah, she will go down as one of the more beloved and sometimes most controversial characters in Sonic history from a non-game character perspective. So that's all I can say, guys. I know I sounded like I rambled a little bit. I did this unscripted on the fly. Hope you guys can accept that. I will let you know what the time length is in the description box down below so you can take your time in listening to this. But yeah, I just thought I'd do that. kind of in response to Crystal Maiden and talking about the situation of 134 and stuff. And yeah, that's all I can say. So, hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, the time links will be in the description so you can take your time and watch listening to this. And that's all I can say, guys. So, till next time, God bless. Take care. I am out.